The war had raged for longer than any species could remember. Across the vast expanse of the known galaxy, empires had risen and fallen, their fleets clashing in an endless cycle of destruction. No clear victor had emerged. The United Coalition of Alien Species, once a mighty alliance formed to maintain balance, now teetered on the edge of collapse, its members exhausted, its resources drained. The enemy, the Dominion of Zelther, was no better off. In the vast war chamber of the Coalition's High Council, Supreme Strategist Velrax, a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, stood before his assembled peers. His chitinous fingers drummed against the cold surface of the command table, his multifaceted eyes scanning the holographic display above him. The map showed a galaxy in flames, its countless systems marked with the crimson sigils of fallen worlds. "There is no path to victory," Velrax said at last. His voice, a deep resonance that sent vibrations through the chamber, silenced the murmurs of the council. "We have fought, we have bled, we have given everything, and still the war drags on. We need an alternative." The others exchanged uneasy glances. Some muttered in their native tongues, their bioluminescent markings flickering in agitation. Admiral Koresh, a towering reptilian warrior of the Zephyr Dominion, bared his fangs. "You speak of surrender?" "No," Velrax answered. "I speak of seeking new allies." A silence followed, heavier than before. Grand Arbiter Zelith, leader of the Ganeth Collective, narrowed her pale, luminous eyes. "Who?" For a moment no one spoke. Then Velrax turned, pressing a control on the console. The image above them shifted, zooming in on a single blue and green world on the outskirts of known space. Humans. The reaction was immediate. Laughter, derision, even disbelief. Some scoffed openly. Others muttered about desperation. "The primitives?" Koresh sneered. "You mean the ones we ignored for centuries? The ones we deemed unworthy of even being part of the greater galactic order. They have no fleet, no presence in the war." Velrax met his gaze. "Perhaps that is precisely why they might succeed where we have failed." Zelith frowned. "You propose we seek their aid? And in what capacity? As mercenaries? They barely qualify as a spacefaring race." The Supreme Strategist leaned forward. "We have dismissed them for too long, but I have studied their history, their wars. And one thing is certain, when humans fight, they do not stop until they win." The council chamber fell into a contemplative hush. Then, reluctantly, Zelith nodded. "We send an envoy." 3 weeks later, the first coalition delegation arrived in Earth's orbit. The humans received them with skepticism. Meetings were arranged between their most powerful nations, their leaders gathering in hidden chambers and secure transmissions. The aliens, expecting to be met with fear or awe, instead found themselves facing sharp-eyed individuals who asked more questions than they answered. The humans listened carefully, absorbing every detail of the war, every nuance of the enemy's tactics. Finally, after days of deliberation, the response came. "We will join, but there was a condition. The humans would not fight alongside the coalition. They would not integrate their forces, nor allow oversight of their military strategies. If they were to engage in this war, they would do so on their own terms." Velrax and the others hesitated, unsure of what to make of this demand. But with no other options, they agreed. A week later, humanity's first war fleet departed from their homeworld. The alien observers aboard the coalition command stations expected to see a slow, cumbersome force, perhaps a small fleet of outdated ships, nothing more than a token effort. What they saw instead defied comprehension. Humanity's fleet did not move in formation like traditional armadas. They did not adhere to known doctrines. Their vessels, sleek and sharp-edged, operated with eerie precision, their movements unpredictable. Strange signals emanated from their ships, algorithms beyond anything the coalition had encountered before. Admiral Koresh watched from his bridge, his claws digging into the armrests of his seat. "They do not follow standard battle protocols," he muttered. Velrax, standing beside him, simply nodded. Humanity had entered the war, and no one, Not their allies, not their enemies, had any idea what was about to happen. The human fleet arrived at the warfront in absolute silence. The vastness of space was filled with wreckage, floating husks of shattered warships, drifting soldiers frozen in the cold abyss, remnants of battles that had raged for centuries. To the untrained eye, it was chaos. To Admiral Koresh, it was familiar. This was the nature of war in the known galaxy. No single species had ever delivered a decisive blow. No strategy had ever turned the tide for long. He stood on the command deck of the Coalition flagship, watching the human ships emerge from the void. Their engines did not burn with the violent orange fire of plasma thrusters, nor did they pulse with the deep green glow of gravitic waveforms like the Coalition's own vessels. They moved without sound, without warning, appearing as though they had always been there, unseen until now. Koresh's claws clicked against the polished surface of his console. Their ships were wrong. They did not possess the towering, overbuilt structures common in warcraft. They were sleek, angular, like blades honed to perfection. Even their hulls gave off an unsettling matte black sheen, absorbing the distant starlight instead of reflecting it. No markings identified their allegiance. They were ghosts. Beside him, Velrax watched with the same intensity, his mandibles twitching in an unreadable expression. The Supreme Strategist had studied the humans, had argued for their inclusion in the war, but now that they were here, even he did not know what to expect. A transmission flickered onto the main holo display. The human commander's face was unsettlingly calm. She wore no elaborate uniform, no decorative medals, only a dark, high-collared coat with a single insignia gleaming at her throat. Her gaze was steady, unwavering. "We are in position," she said. Velrax inclined his head. "Admiral Salas, the Dominion fleet is moving to intercept. They will not retreat. They have held this sector for 70 years. "Not for long," she replied. Her confidence unsettled them. No bluster, no hesitation, just fact. The Dominion war fleet surged forward, a wall of obsidian warships moving with precision, their formations drilled over centuries of unending war. Koresh could see the calculations in real time, how the enemy adjusted their vectors, how their ships aligned perfectly to maximize their overlapping fields of fire. This was not an undisciplined force. This was the apex of centuries of refinement, of adaptation. The Dominion was not reckless. They were not foolish. They did not take unnecessary risks. And yet, the humans did not react. Their fleet remained eerily still, as if waiting. Koresh felt a growl rise in his throat. "Why aren't they moving?" Velrax exhaled, his mandibles clicking together. "They are calculating." And then, without warning, the humans struck. Their ships did not advance in steady formations. They did not trade long-range fire in predictable, orchestrated exchanges. Instead, they vanished. One moment, the dark hulls hung motionless in the void. The next, they were gone. The Dominion reacted with admirable speed, adjusting their weapons, sweeping the void with sensor pulses. But it was too late. Human ships reappeared inside their formations, impossibly close, already in motion. What followed was not battle. It was slaughter. The humans did not fire conventional weapons. No visible projectiles streaked across space. No brilliant lances of plasma connected ships in violent eruptions. Instead, Dominion vessels simply died. Their shields flickered, collapsed. Their hulls split apart as if wrenched open by unseen hands. Crew compartments vented their inhabitants into the vacuum before they even realized they were under attack. Koresh's eyes darted to the battle readout. The human weapons had no detectable energy signature, no discernible trajectory. One moment, a Dominion dreadnought was whole. The next, it was debris. "What are they using?" someone whispered. No one had an answer. Admiral Salas's voice came over the comms, utterly calm. Phase 1 complete. Moving to Phase 2. The remaining Dominion ships attempted to retreat, but the humans were relentless. Every escape route had been predicted, every possible maneuver accounted for. Their fleet did not move with organic hesitation, with the natural inefficiencies of biological decision-making. They moved like inevitability itself. Koresh had fought countless battles. He had seen entire worlds burn, had watched empires crumble. But he had never seen anything like this. The final Dominion command ship attempted to flee at full burn. It made it exactly 14 seconds before something unseen struck its hull. It did not explode. It simply ceased to be. Silence fell across the coalition fleet. Even Velrax, who had pushed for this, who had believed in humanity's potential, looked shaken. The battle had lasted exactly 40 minutes. The war, if it could still be called that, had changed. On the bridge of the coalition flagship, no one spoke. The holo display flickered, showing the wreckage-strewn battlefield, the last embers of Dominion resistance fading into the void. And then, as if nothing had happened, Admiral Salas's face returned to the screen. She did not gloat, did not celebrate. She simply asked, "What's next?" The battlefield was silent. What remained of the Dominion fleet had either been obliterated or had fled beyond the range of coalition sensors. The wreckage of once proud warships drifted in the cold void, lifeless and forgotten. Victory had come so swiftly, so effortlessly, that it felt wrong. Velrax watched the debris field on the holo display, his mandibles twitching. It was over. Decades of warfare, billions of lives lost, and yet the humans had ended it in less than an hour. He had argued for their inclusion in the war, but he had not anticipated this. He had believed they would fight like any other species. Tactically, strategically, perhaps with more efficiency. But this was not war. This was annihilation. Admiral Koresh sat motionless at the command table, his claws flexing and unflexing. His people had fought the Dominion for centuries, had lost entire generations to the conflict. And now, with no grand final battle, no triumphant stand, it was simply over. The enemy had been crushed before they had even understood what was happening. A transmission request flickered on the screen. Admiral Salas. Velrax hesitated, then accepted. The human commander's face appeared, her expression unreadable as ever. She did not look pleased, nor did she look concerned. Just calm. "Admiral," Velrax said carefully, "your forces have achieved victory." Salas nodded. "We have." Her voice held no trace of pride, no hint of arrogance. Just another fact. Koresh let out a low, guttural growl. What did you do?" Salas studied him, as if deciding how much she wanted to say. "We ended the war." "That is not an answer," Koresh snapped. She exhaled. "Dominion fleet movements were predictable. We deployed adaptive warfare algorithms to anticipate their every maneuver. We disabled their communication networks before the battle even began. Their ships were dead before they knew they were under attack." Koresh's jaw tightened. "That does not explain how your weapons bypassed their shields." Salas was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You do not need to know." Velrax stiffened. "Excuse me?" She met his gaze through the display. "You asked us to end the war. We did. The methods do not matter." Koresh slammed a fist onto the table. "The methods always matter." Salas did not flinch. "Not to us." Velrax's mandibles clicked. "Admiral Salas, we fought for generations. We lost billions. And now, in less than an hour, it is over. The Dominion was the greatest military force in the galaxy. They adapted, they endured. And yet they could not touch you. We do not understand what you are." Salas was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You assumed humanity was weak. You thought we were primitives, that because we had not spread across the stars as quickly as you, we were unworthy of notice." Velrax said nothing. She continued, "But we did not expand because we did not need to. We do not conquer. We do not seek dominion. We stayed on our world and perfected the one thing that mattered." Koresh narrowed his eyes. "And what is that?" Salas's gaze was steady. "War." The word hung in the air, heavy with finality. Velrax's mind reeled. Every species in the galaxy fought, but they fought out of necessity, out of survival, out of instinct. War was a burden, a cycle of suffering. But to the humans, it was something else. Something deliberate. Something perfected. Koresh's breathing was slow, controlled, but Velrax could see the tension in his posture. Then why did you wait? If you were this powerful, if you had this knowledge, why not join the war sooner? Solas's expression did not change. Because it was not our war. The chamber fell into silence. Velrax exhaled slowly. And now? Solas tilted her head slightly. Now it is. Velrax exchanged a glance with Koresh. A chill ran through him. The war was over, but something deeper had begun. The humans had revealed themselves, and now, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Solas's voice cut through his thoughts. There will be consequences. The Dominion was powerful, but they were not the only threat. Others will come. Others will challenge us. And we will be ready. Koresh clenched his fists. And if we stand in your way? Solas did not smile. Then you will not stand for long. The transmission ended. Velrax sat back, his mind racing. The humans had won the war in 40 minutes. But the real question was, what would they do next? The echoes of war had not yet faded, and already the galaxy whispered in fear. The Dominion was gone, crushed in a single battle that had lasted no longer than the time it took for a single planet to complete a rotation. The coalition forces had witnessed it firsthand, their fleets watching from the sidelines, powerless as the humans turned one of the greatest military powers in history into little more than debris. And now, the balance of power had shifted. Velrax stood in the observation chamber aboard the coalition's central command station, his eyes fixed on the void beyond. The stars had not changed, yet everything felt different. Reports flooded in from across the known galaxy. Species that had once feared the Dominion now feared something new. The humans had not asked for territory, had not issued demands, had not declared themselves rulers of anything. But the absence of a claim did not ease the growing unease. Behind him, Koresh entered, his heavy footfalls betraying his barely restrained aggression. The Zephyr warrior had been silent for days after the battle, speaking only when necessary, his normally thunderous presence dimmed by something that Velrax could only describe as disquiet. You feel it too, Koresh rumbled. It was not a question. Velrax nodded. The galaxy is afraid. They should be. Koresh moved closer, his clawed hands flexing as he stared into the void. The humans are unnatural. No species fights like that. No species wins like that. Velrax turned to face him. And yet they did. Koresh let out a slow breath, steam curling from his nostrils. I have fought all my life. War is not just blood and death. It is will, endurance, sacrifice. It is a thing of flesh and steel, of attrition and hard-won victories. But the humans... His claws scraped against the metal railing. They do not fight a war. They erase it. Velrax understood. There had been no great loss on the human side, no desperate countermeasures, no costly final gambit. They had moved with the cold precision of inevitability. They had ended the war as if it had never truly mattered. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Priority transmission. Velrax and Koresh exchanged glances before Velrax accepted the call. The screen flickered to life, and Admiral Solas's face appeared once more. Her expression was, as always, unreadable. The coalition has officially declared victory, Velrax said. The Dominion's remnants have scattered. There is no organized resistance left. Solas gave a slight nod. Expected. Koresh's eyes narrowed. You sound uninterested. Solas's gaze flickered to him. Because the Dominion was never the true concern. Velrax felt something cold settle in his chest. Then what is? For the first time, Solas's expression changed. It was not anger nor satisfaction. It was calculation. This war was not an isolated conflict, she said. The Dominion was powerful, but they were not the only force at play. Others watched. Others waited. And now that the balance has been broken, they will move. Velrax knew she was right. Empires that had stayed neutral, waiting for the inevitable exhaustion of both sides, now had no reason to hold back. The humans had shattered the status quo, and in doing so they had invited chaos. Koresh exhaled sharply. You knew this would happen. Yes, Solas admitted. Velrax's mandibles tightened. And you did it anyway. The human admiral leaned forward slightly. You misunderstand. This was inevitable. The Dominion's fall was simply the first shift in a much larger game. Velrax studied her carefully. Then what do you propose? Solace was silent for a moment, then said, An alliance. Koresh barked a short, humorless laugh. You fight like gods and now ask for unity? Solace met his gaze without hesitation. We do not need allies to win, but you will need us to survive. The weight of her words settled over them like a heavy shroud. She was not asking out of necessity. Humanity had no need for the coalition. They had demonstrated that clearly. But the coalition, fractured, war-weary, could not afford to stand alone against what was coming. Velrax took a slow breath. What is your endgame, Admiral? Solace tilted her head slightly. We do not seek to rule. We do not seek to conquer. But we will not allow chaos to consume what remains. Koresh crossed his arms. And if we refuse? Solace's expression did not change. Then you will fight alone. The transmission cut out. Velrax turned back to the stars, his thoughts a storm of uncertainty. The war had ended, but in its place, something far greater had begun. And the humans were at the center of it all.